Hello and welcome to The Last Hike. In this video, I'll go through the story of a hiker whose childlike faith in Google Maps was so absurdly misplaced that she ignored some deadly warnings. Her naive shortcut detour spiraled into a slow-motion horror show of collapse, ending in a death so gruesome that even hardened investigators called it a textbook tragedy of blind faith. It was Friday, the 14th of June, 2019. A day that started the same way hundreds of other days at the Grand Canyon start, with headlamps, water bottles, and people convincing themselves that today was going to go exactly as planned. Her name was Dana Schulman, 31 years old, from Phoenix, Arizona. She worked at a mid-sized marketing firm downtown, sat at a desk most of the week, and had only started hiking a few months earlier. It began as a casual way to lose weight and clear her head short loops at South Mountain Park near her apartment, then a few well-traveled trails in the Superstitions on weekends. She had bought real hiking shoes and a day pack. She had downloaded all trails and Google Maps. She was not a thrill seeker. She was the kind of person who read reviews before booking a restaurant and kept her car registration current. Her coworkers described her as organized and thorough, the type who sent meeting agendas the day before. But she had never done anything like the Grand Canyon. For over a year, she had wanted to see the Colorado River from inside the canyon after being inspired by striking photos online. When a long holiday weekend gave her 4 free days, she decided it was finally time to make the trip and experience the river firsthand. She prepared, sort of. She read a few blog posts about the South Kebab Trail, mostly first-person accounts that focused on the views. She watched a YouTube video shot in the spring when the temperatures were mild, and the hiker in the video made the climb back up look hard but doable. She spent an evening on Google Maps tracing the route down to the river and back. She planned her start time to beat the worst of the heat. She told a friend where she was going and when she expected to be back. By the time she packed her bag the night before, she had done what most casual beginners would consider a thorough job of getting ready. Now, knowing how it ended, I realized the issue wasn't a lack of effort, it was actually inexperience. She lacked the knowledge to recognize the danger that she was facing. The forecast for that Friday was not ambiguous. Temperatures on the rim were expected to reach the low 90s. On the canyon floor, near the river corridor, it was going to be close to 112 degrees Fahrenheit by early afternoon. The National Park Service had been issuing heat advisories. Their guidance was specific. Do not hike below the rim between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. during peak summer heat. The warnings were on signs, on the park website, on kiosks at the trailhead. They were not hidden. Dana knew it was going to be hot. Her calculation was that she would start before sunrise, reach the river quickly, take photos, and return to the rim before the temperature peaked. She believed she was physically capable of, that she was young and reasonably fit, but she had no real understanding of how elevation gain affects the body. She had never hiked more than 6 miles in a day. She had never climbed more than 1,500 feet in a single stretch. South Kaibab would demand nearly 5,000 feet of ascent on the way out. She assumed there would be shade in the lower canyon. She assumed there would be water access along the way. Both of those assumptions were wrong, and in my view, they became 2 of the most consequential mistakes she made that day. She arrived at the South Kaibab trailhead before sunrise around 4:45 a.m. The parking area was already active. This is normal for a summer Friday at the Grand Canyon. Other hikers moved around in the pre-dawn dark with headlamps, checking pack straps, filling water bottles at the station near the trailhead kiosk. The air was cool, maybe 65 degrees. There was a light breeze. It felt like a perfect morning. Rangers were stationed at the trailhead, as they regularly are during high heat periods. They were speaking with visitors, handing out printed heat advisory cards, and pointing people toward the water stations. A whiteboard near the trailhead listed the expected high temperature in the inner canyon, 112 degrees Fahrenheit. The warnings were visible and spoken aloud. A couple from Colorado later told investigators they had a brief conversation with Dana near the trailhead. They were preparing for a shorter out-and-back hike, and she approached them to ask whether South Kaibab was the fastest route down to the river. They confirmed it was. They also told her that the climb back out was brutal, long, fully exposed, with no water sources anywhere on the trail. She nodded. She seemed excited, maybe a little nervous. She thanked them and moved on. The woman from Colorado later recalled thinking that Dana's pack looked small, but she didn't say anything. A fellow hiker later told investigators her pack appeared unusually light for a river hike, and estimated she was carrying only a limited water supply, though he chose not to intervene. Dana's gear consisted of a day pack, about 3 liters of water, energy bars, a phone, and a backup battery. She carried no electrolyte supplements, emergency locator beacon, or paper map, relying instead on a screenshot of the trail map stored on her phone. She was wearing trail running shoes sufficient for the maintained trail and lightweight synthetic pants. She had a hat and sunglasses. She looked like someone who had watched a few YouTube videos and bought gear at REI. She was not the worst prepared person to ever start down South Kaibab, but she was far from the best. South Kaibab is one of the most dramatic trails in the American National Park System. It drops approximately 4,800 feet, over roughly 7 miles to the Colorado River, and it accomplishes most of that drop in the open. There are almost no trees on South Kaibab. There is almost no shade. It is a series of exposed switchbacks carved into the canyon wall, and on a clear summer morning, the views from those switchbacks are the kind that make you stop walking entirely just to look. The sunrise was hitting the canyon walls in horizontal layers of orange and pink and deep red as Dana made her way down, and she was taking photos frequently. That's documented. Her friend later provided text messages sent from the trail that morning, and the tone was unmistakably joyful. She texted that the place was unreal, that she was already way deeper than she had expected. She noted that the trail was steeper than she had imagined, a comment that almost every first-time South Kaibab hiker would recognize. She passed hikers who were already on their way back up, experienced canyon hikers who had started their climb out before dawn to beat the heat.
I've even read several witness accounts of people mentioning the heat to her.
One woman, a seasoned backpacker from Flagstaff, told her directly that she should consider turning around before 10 a.m. The exchange was brief and friendly. Dana was polite, but she felt good. Her heart rate was elevated but manageable. Her legs were responding well. The river was pulling her forward with that particular magnetism that the bottom of the Grand Canyon seems to generate.
If you're a hiker like me, that feeling of physical competence is real, and it's also one of the canyon's most effective traps.
The descent is rewarding in a way that sedates your risk-sensing instincts. You feel good, so you assume things will continue to feel good. But your body has been spending energy and water the entire time, and none of that gets paid back on the way down. It all comes due on the climb. She reached the river corridor, the area adjacent to the Colorado River at the canyon floor, around 9 a.m. She sent another message to her friend. "Made it! Not as hard as everyone said." Her friend responded, "Be careful coming back. Heat is no joke." That exchange, timestamped and later recovered from her friend's phone, placed Dana at the river after roughly 4 hours of descent. She had covered nearly 7 miles and dropped close to a mile in elevation. She took photographs near the water. The river was there, exactly as she had imagined it. Narrow, muddy brown in the summer light, with canyon walls rising thousands of feet into the sky on every side. She still had about 2 liters of water left she had drunk, only 1 liter on the descent.
That was her first serious mistake. In dry heat, you should be drinking constantly, not waiting for thirst.
By the time you feel thirsty, you're already behind. She didn't know that. She sat on a rock, ate half an energy bar, and pulled out her phone. The temperature was already climbing past 90 degrees at the river. It was going to get much worse. The plan, as she had conceived it back in Phoenix, was simple. Rest at the river for 20 minutes, then start the climb back out. Stick to South Kaibab. Stay on the trail. That plan was going to be hard. It was going to require real effort in genuine heat, but it was executable.
People complete that exact route every day throughout the summer. I've even done it myself.
Instead, she opened the hiking app on her phone, a popular trail finding app that works offline with downloaded maps. Weeks earlier, while planning the trip, she had saved a pin for a viewpoint called O'Neill Butte. The photos online showed a dramatic overlook of the canyon's inner gorge. From the river, the app showed a trail, a thin blue line that appeared to connect to that viewpoint via a short side route. The distance on screen looked manageable, maybe half a mile. What Dana did not know, and what the app did not communicate, was that the blue line represented a combination of a legitimate NPS trail for the first few hundred yards, and then a faint, unmaintained use path that faded into loose rock and dead-end drainages. The app did not distinguish between maintained trails and social trails. On a 5-inch phone screen, with the sun already bright, the difference looked like nothing at all. She made a calculation that many beginners make. "I came all this way. I'm right here. It's just a few more minutes." She sent a text to her friend, "Going to check out a viewpoint real quick, then heading up." Her friend replied, "Don't go off trail. Please just start climbing out." Dana did not respond. A backpacker in the area had the last confirmed encounter with her. He was filtering water near the river and noticed a young woman standing at the edge of a dry wash, staring at her phone with a concentrated frown. He approached and asked if she needed help finding the main trail. She told him she was looking for a route to O'Neill Butte. He told her he didn't think there was a direct trail from here, that she'd need to go back up South Kaibab and take a different tralu. She thanked him, but seemed unconvinced. She turned and started walking up a side drainage. He watched her for a moment, considered following, then decided she was an adult. He went back to filtering water. No one saw Dana Schulman again after that.
Now, I should note that everything from this point forward was reconstructed by investigators.
They worked from her phone's GPS data, her text messages and their timestamps, location pings from her carrier's network, and the 911 call. What follows is their best reconstruction of what happened. Where the evidence is direct, I'll say so. Where investigators and experts are drawing conclusions from physical evidence, I'll say that too. She kept moving after the backpacker left. The GPS data shows continued movement away from the main corridor, heading east-northeast into terrain that does not appear on any National Park Service map as a maintained route. The temperature was climbing past 100 degrees by 11 a.m. In the inner canyon away from the river, with no breeze and the sun angling down between the walls, the air does not just warm up, it accumulates heat. The rock walls absorb it all morning and begin releasing it back. Standing anywhere in that environment without shade is the physiological equivalent of sitting in a parked car with the windows up. She texted her friend around 11:30 a.m. The trail got weird. Not sure I'm going the right way. That message, timestamped and recovered later, is one of the more significant pieces of evidence in the investigation because it marks the moment when she recognized something was wrong but hadn't yet escalated it to an emergency. Her friend reading that text in Phoenix replied immediately, "Go back to the main trail. Do not keep going. Turn around." Dana's response was, "I think I'm almost there."
That response, measured against the GPS data from that same time window, is very likely incorrect.
Investigators believe she was already moving away from any maintained trail and further into unmapped terrain. The viewpoint she was trying to reach was not close. It was over a mile away, across a series of small ridges and dry washes. The route she was on was not the one she thought she was on. But from where she was standing, looking at her phone, with the blue line showing a destination just ahead, it probably felt like she was nearly done. Most of us have been in a version of that situation, slightly lost, but confident we're about to figure it out. The difference between that experience in a city park and that experience in the inner Grand Canyon in June is the difference between inconvenience and a survival situation. She was burning water her body could not replace. The electrolytes she hadn't packed were already a deficit her muscles were starting to feel. And every step she took was a step taken in the hottest part of one of the hottest places in North America. The terrain Dana was moving through, reconstructed from the GPS track, was consistent with the landscape that exists just off the maintained corridors in the inner canyon. It is not dramatic in the way that canyon terrain is usually described. No sheer cliffs, no technical climbing. It is subtler and in some ways worse. Loose rock underfoot that shifts when you step on it. Dry washes that look exactly like trails but lead to dead ends or down into side drainages that have no clear exit. Small canyon branches that appear to be going in the right direction until they aren't. Junctions that aren't junctions. Paths that fade into nothing. Her phone's offline maps operating in this environment were showing her lines that carried the visual authority of real routes. In reality, investigators believed those lines represented either faint use paths worn by occasional off-trail travel or, in some cases, simply the algorithm's inference of possible connectivity between 2 points. The app was doing what it was designed to do. It just wasn't designed for the Grand Canyon Inner Canyon in June with a dehydrated hiker making decisions under advancing heat illness. Her texts became less frequent and shorter. The one that stands out arrived around 12:45 p.m. This doesn't look right. Those 4 words are the clearest signal in the written record that she understood she had made a mistake. Her friend, who had been growing increasingly anxious, began calling. The calls went to voicemail. Whether she couldn't hear them over the terrain, or whether the signal was too weak to connect consistently, or whether she was already in a condition where answering a call felt impossible, the records don't definitively say. What the GPS data does show is that during the period following that last text, her movement became erratic in a very specific way. Short bursts of movement in one direction, then a stop, then movement in a different direction, then backtracking over ground she had already covered. This is the GPS signature of someone who is lost and trying to reorient, moving towards something that looks promising, discovering it isn't, reversing, trying again. Investigators estimated she spent over an hour in this pattern, from roughly 1 p.m. to 2:15 p.m. Every minute of that hour was a minute spent in temperatures that had reached 110 degrees Fahrenheit in full exposure, with her water running dangerously low and no shade available. The physical cost of that hour was compounding in ways that would very shortly take the decision-making out of her hands entirely. By mid-afternoon, around 2 p.m., the inner canyon temperatures were near their daily peak of 112 degrees Fahrenheit. The sun was as high as it gets, which meant the canyon walls cast almost no shadow at that hour. The rock's surface temperature, the actual temperature of the ground she was walking on, was substantially higher than the air temperature above it, likely exceeding 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Dana had been on her feet and moving for nearly 10 hours. Heat illness doesn't announce itself clearly. It builds in stages, and the cruelest part of how it works is that by the time it begins affecting your judgment, you are no longer reliably able to recognize that your judgment is affected. Medical experts who consulted on the investigation described the likely progression in detail, and it's important because it explains what the phone data shows during this period. In the early stages, the body does everything right, sweating heavily to cool itself, increasing heart rate to circulate blood, directing resources to the muscles.
To me, that's the dangerous part. These symptoms feel like normal hard exercise fatigue, the kind most active people would simply push through.
Then comes the transition into heat exhaustion, muscle cramping as electrolytes are depleted, a headache that builds behind the eyes, dizziness when standing, a growing sense of mental fog. These are warning signs. They are also easy to misread as ordinary fatigue when you believe you are almost to safety. The stage beyond that heat stroke is where the brain itself is affected. The internal temperature regulation system begins to fail. Core body temperature rises past 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and the brain cannot function normally. Confusion sets in, not as a vague sense of being off, but as a measurable deterioration in the ability to reason, make decisions, and assess situations accurately. People in this stage often believe they are fine. They often believe they are close to help.
They often believe that they're close to help. They often keep moving when the only correct action is to stop.
Dana's phone logs from this period show repeated opening of the map application dozens of times in quick succession, as if she was looking at the screen, not understanding what she was seeing, closing it and opening it again. The GPS pings show frequent stops. The movement patterns are consistent with someone struggling to process visual information. She sent one last text to her friend around 2:20 p.m. It said, "Tired, no shade." Her friend's response was immediate and urgent, telling her to sit down and that she would call 911. Dana did not reply. Her friend called park dispatch within 2 minutes. Based on the GPS position at that time and the topography of the area, investigators believe her assessment of no shade was accurate. In the terrain she was in, at that time of day, there was likely no meaningful shade available within any reasonable distance. The canyon walls were too low and too far away to cast shadows at that hour. She kept moving slowly, erratically. Investigators believe she continued because she was still convinced that safety was just ahead of her, a trail, a ranger, a water source. That belief, in her physiological state at that point, was most likely a product of the confusion that comes with advancing heat illness rather than any clear-eyed assessment of her situation. The canyon looks similar in many directions.
Looking at the terrain, I can understand how someone in her condition might believe that the next ridge was the last obstacle standing between her and help.
Her water was gone. Both 5-liter bottles were empty. She had stopped sweating, a critical sign of severe dehydration and impending heat stroke. The call came in at 2:37 p.m. The dispatcher who took it noted the caller's voice immediately strained, labored, breathing audible and fast in a way that wasn't consistent with normal exertion. There was a quality to the speech that experienced dispatchers recognize, words that came out slightly slower than they should have, a flatness that indicated someone operating at the outer edge of their cognitive capacity. The dispatcher moved through the standard questions: name, location, how much water she had left, any landmarks she could see, physical symptoms. Dana answered all of them, but the answers were problematic. Her name came through clearly. Her location did not. She said she could see canyon walls, which was true of every point in the Grand Canyon. She believed the river was somewhere behind her, but based on the GPS data recovered from her phone, that belief was incorrect. She had wandered nearly a mile from the river corridor. When the dispatcher asked which direction she had come from, she said uphill, which was not specific enough to be useful. The dispatcher asked her to open her phone's emergency GPS sharing feature. Dana tried, but the connection was too slow to complete the handshake. The dispatcher attempted to ping her phone from the dispatch center's system, but the canyon walls degraded the signal to the point that the returned coordinates had an error radius of nearly 1,000 feet, the difference between one drainage and the next. The dispatcher made the call quickly. This person was suffering from serious heat illness and did not know her precise location. That combination, in that environment, was a search and rescue situation.
The instructions came clearly and directly. Stop moving, find any shade, even partial shade, a shadow from a rock outcropping, anything. Sit down and stay down. Do not use energy trying to hike out. Conserving what her body had left was the only thing she could do that would help the people who were already being mobilized to find her.
But get this, the call didn't end there. It continued for nearly 9 minutes. What happened over those 9 minutes was a slow unwinding.
Her speech got slower. The pauses between sentences stretched from 2 seconds to 5 seconds to 10 seconds. The dispatcher asked questions and waited longer for answers. At one point, Dana said that she sees a rock, a big rock, and that she was going to sit on it. Then there was a long pause. The call ended at 2:46 p.m. Whether the connection dropped on its own or whether she let the phone fall from her hand, the evidence doesn't say. No further data was received from her device. The final GPS ping placed her in a small side canyon approximately 1.2 miles east of the South Kaibab Trail corridor at an elevation of roughly 2,400 feet. Rangers launched the search within minutes of the 911 call.
Now, you might assume that once a search begins, help is on the way.
But what you have to remember is that the same brutal heat affecting the missing hiker is also affecting the people trying to find them. Searchers operating in 112-degree heat have their own physiological limits. Helicopter operations in extreme heat are affected by air density, requiring longer takeoff rolls and reducing lift capacity. Ground teams moving through rough canyon terrain in full sun face the same radiant heat environment the missing person is in. Search teams from the rim, river corridor, and air mobilized quickly, using phone pings, witness accounts, GPS data, and terrain analysis to narrow down her likely location. Overnight, helicopters with thermal imaging and ground crews continued searching, and at 5:42 a.m. on June 15, searchers found her empty backpack in a dry wash and located her body about 200 feet away beneath a rock overhang. The autopsy confirmed severe heat stroke and dehydration with extreme electrolyte loss, leading to rhabdomyolysis and organ failure. There were no traumatic injuries. The coroner estimated she died between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m., several hours after her 911 call, after exhausting her water supply in the canyon's extreme conditions.
I want you to think about that for a moment. Hours alone in the heat, growing weaker, increasingly confused, and knowing that help hadn't arrived.
The Grand Canyon was unchanged by what happened to Dana Schulman. The South Kaibab Trail remained open the following morning. The canyon is not a trap. It is a place with real conditions, and those conditions don't bend for anyone.
The only thing that changes the outcome is understanding, before you start, exactly what you're walking into, and what you'll need to walk back out.